All right, guys, welcome. Welcome back to another weekly live demo. I'm super excited to be jumping into today's live demo. The main focus for today is talking about how Excelsius can help you set up for the week and make sure you are prepared to fire away properly. And so, as always, legends, before we jump into today's live demo, if you have ever any questions, please don't ever hesitate to reach out. You can reach out on the website at www.pinksand.co. And with that, let's jump straight into today's live demo. So without a doubt, for sure, we've seen already the markets move a decent amount. We're mainly going to focus on the major markets here across the board. Take a look at the index market, precious metals, commodities, FX, and cryptos. We'll take a look at everything and really see how the market opened and what Excelsius was telling us. Main settings that we have on currently at this time are the rejection zones and market structure settings. Those are the main settings that I personally like to use when it comes down to scanning the markets for opportunities and just overall plays, really taking a look at what potential opportunities are out there. Since we have the S&P, we're going to be starting with indexes and then moving accordingly. Let's start straight into it and let's see how Excelsius could start helping us set up for the given week. Straight off the bat, Excelsius is giving us a tremendous amount of information here. We can definitely see here that price is still very much pulling off of this previous region that we can see here. The rejection zones as well are also giving that indication. Now, this did happen the prior week. However, we can see that price has very much established a range between this 4,200 handle up until about this 4,600 handle, about a 400-point range. Definitely something, though, worth trading in these volatile environments. S&P, nonetheless, though, has definitely established a range. Excelsius giving us those areas to trade within. 4,200 area up into that 4,600, identifying the main high and the main low of this range since we pulled off of the rejection zone, which also coincided with this previous point of structure. And so in reality, when we're taking a look at the longer time frame structure here, it's very simple. Unless we can successfully get above or get below these key points, we can only expect price to range very much in this 400-point range. Now, be mindful, 400 points is a tremendous amount. We're talking anywhere from 8% up or down, dependent on which way you are moving. That is an extensive amount of movement for the indexes, especially the stock market. And so it is something that there is opportunity within, but we want to be mindful, once again, that environment directions will be short-lived until we can start breaking through one of these key areas. Excelsius, straight off the bat, telling us that with the rejection zones and key levels that it did go ahead and pinpoint. And so now it's a matter of moving into the smaller time frames and seeing what potential are around. Now, dropping down into the 4-hour time frame here, as we know, Excelsius tools will completely adapt to the time frame in which that we are trading within. We can definitely see here that the rejection zones are giving us a shorter term environment that we can trade within. It goes back down into those main points, that 4,200 handle up until about that 4,600 handle in here. And so with that, what we can see inside of this range is that price is currently pushing off a previous rejection zone, which also coincides with a pretty big amount of orders that are sitting within this 4,300 handle up until about this 4,500 region. And so definitely we are starting to experience some type of consolidation or deceleration within structure itself. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to be switching direction soon. What we can see is that price did just recently break through a significant point within structure. And so with that, in the intraday aspect, and we'll take a look a little bit in the smaller time frame as well, unless we can start breaking through some of this previous descending pressure here, all we can expect is further continued movements down into these previous regions. Now, we want to be mindful, though, that these moves are going to be choppy. They are going to be consolidated. And we very much can see that Excelsius is telling us exactly this. We are pushing into that first zone of the rejection zone, and we are pushing into some previous key levels. Now, if we decide to go ahead and turn on the institutional volume tool here, we can see here that price is definitely going to be sitting through some orders, and we definitely can see that to be true with the institutional volume telling us that a lot of orders are sitting within here, and it makes sense on why we are receiving the deceleration and exhaustion that we are seeing within the marketplace. Right off the bat, before even dropping into the smaller time frames, notice how Excelsius is automatically planning those trades for us. It's giving us indications of where we can expect slowdowns and ultimately what we can expect with our plays, right? Daily telling us that, hey, you can range between 4,600 down until about that 4,200 region. Until you break either side, everything's going to be short term. And as we start to drop into the smaller time frames, notice how Excelsius's tools are adapting with that given environment. Absolutely incredible, and really makes what Excelsius is, which is the #1 trading algorithm in the world, being as adaptable as it is, becomes suitable for any and every type of market participant. Now, dropping down into more of the intraday fashion, trying to take a look at how we can expect some potential continued movements on either side here. What we can see is definitely prices in some serious sensitivity here, but once again, we can see that we do have some key levels that we do want to successfully break if we want to see any type of shift out of this short-term descending structure here. What we can see is that this 44.30 area is definitely the area that we want to successfully break if we want to receive any type of shift out. And at the same point, if we can successfully get through these lows, we could start to expect a further push down into maybe this previous 4,200 area, which is where those daily lows sit. Until then, we can definitely expect some type of deceleration or exhaustion within this region, and that is very much expected, being in the rejection zones that we're in, being in the environment that we're in, that we saw in the higher time frame. And so right off the bat, now we're simply waiting. If we had to go ahead, we'll simply just set our alerts accordingly. We'll simply set higher highs to successfully break this lower high here. And we'll also set lower lows at the same time. Once price can successfully give us either type of play, we'll be ready to fire away. And that is the beauty when it comes down to Excelsius. We've done our analysis. We know what's going on within the market environment. Now we're just simply sitting and waiting to see what price is going to do. This is really what Excelsius was designed for, to really take your trading to a whole new level when it comes down to overall analysis and data being provided, but at the same time, efficiency more so, right? More efficient you are, the more trades you can take, the higher P&L you ultimately intake. And so Excelsius taking care of the job there, giving us the indications of what's going on with the index market. Definitely everything short term sitting within that 4,200 up until that 4,600 range there. We can see here in the smaller time frames that we are pushing into a previous rejection zone. We know on the 4-hour, this is a very sensitive region here. It's providing all the orders that are currently going on. However, we want to be mindful, once again, Excelsius is telling us until we break above that key level, we could still successfully drop. But of course, we got to get through this 43.6 area. And so until then, we're very much going to be waiting to see what price successfully does within this region. But notice how Excelsius is automatically setting us up for the week. Now we just simply wait for those alerts to take off. It's the beauty of Excelsius. Second pair of eyes and ears. Let's jump to the next market. So indexes, we know we're very much are going to be waiting for. Taking a look at the crypto market, we'll focus mainly on BTC for today. Once again, big theme, really taking a look at how Excelsius can help us set up for the week. Jumping off onto the daily time frame, similar structure to S&P there, right? They do take a global stance together, but a little bit different at the same time. What we can see in the similarities is that price did push through that first rejection zone, which also coincides with a tremendous amount of orders that we did see within the marketplace here. However, we want to be mindful, once again, that price is in a range as well. We can see that price is held by this 45K area down until about this 33,000 area. And so because of that, until we successfully break through one point or the other, we very much can only expect a range-bound environment within this region, and that's all you can expect and what Excelsius is telling you. Now, we start to drop down into the smaller time frames here. What we can see is that definitely the tools are going to be adapting accordingly to the time frame. And what we can see here is that there is a potential trade for either direction. Now, what we can see is that price did just recently push off of the rejection zone on the 4-hour time frame here. And what we can see is that now price has successfully developed a base near this major level sitting within here. And so if we can successfully start to break through, you may start to expect some short-term pushes into the downside. However, if we can start to continue this bullish momentum, you may get some shorter term trades here in the smaller time frame, which we can take a look in just a sec. However, anything from a higher time frame standpoint, you definitely want to be getting above this high, which also coincides with this previous point within structure within here. It is the main reason why the rejection zone is sitting within this region and also previous points. So we definitely can see that the buyers do have some sensitivity up in those regions. But nonetheless, that does not mean that you can't get some short-term opportunities inside that range. When we take a look at the daily time frame, we take a look at what Excelsius is potentially providing us, we can see here that there might be some short-term plays into the upside if we can successfully break through this previous point within here. And at the same time, as mentioned before, if we can start to successfully break below, you may start to expect a drop down. But nonetheless, very much patience is the name of the game, especially when it comes down to trading the crypto market. And so if we can get some successfully clean breaks above these points, you definitely can have some free flowing movements. Once again, Excelsius really providing the areas in which we can start looking for those trades. It's a matter of now just simply waiting and letting market make the first move. Once again, Excelsius being that added confluence we need, utilizing our existing foundation to continue to execute accordingly. And so Excelsius giving us some really clean plays pertaining to the potential movements of BTC, letting it set up our opportunities and moving accordingly. Super smooth when it comes down to the crypto space. We can see once again, just like S&P, as we saw, everything is going to be short-term inside those ranges until we get any type of significant movement. That's very much how we're going to be looking at the market in its entirety. Right off the bat, notice what we're doing there. We're not really forcing any type of trade. We're really just allowing Excelsius to tell us what is going on with the rejection zones, with the key points in there, and simply no need to turn on any of those other tools because we're not in any other type of environments. If we were in more aggressive environments, if we were actually in the trade, we might be turning on market structure candles. We might be turning on the institutional volume profile a little bit more. But for the moment, we're really trying to just get a sense of where we are environmentally speaking and what needs to happen to expect continuations or shifts. So that's S&P, that's BTC, cryptos and indexes, very much just a waiting game at this point. Let's take a look at some of the precious metals here. We'll focus on gold, which tends to be a favorite for a lot of players in here. And gold has definitely been moving over the last 24 hours. We can see that Friday's close was a very strong one, creating a higher high. And we can see that today's market close also pushed straight into that next region. And so no question about that. Now we can see that Excelsius is telling us that we are moving into a sensitive point in here. However, we may still have some continued movements of this bullish pressure, potentially attempting to target this previous rejection zone, which may also coincide with these previous highs sitting within that 1900 region. Now, gold is a little bit of a different situation than the S&P and indexes, solely for the fact that it is creating higher highs. It is furthering this bullish momentum within here. And so because of that, we very much want to be a little bit more biased on the buys because of what just recently happened. But that doesn't mean that you can't set up for some short-term counter trend plays. Let Excelsius guide you though first. Now we can see on the 4-hour time frame is that price is pushing into a previous rejection zone within here. Makes sense. We did just have a massive rally today. And so at some point we do need to start decelerating or exhausting. And that's really what we're here to look for. We are really looked here to see if price can start giving us some indications of pulling off of this previous ascending movement and then giving us an opportunity for another leg to the upside. Now, if this is something that you do ultimately want to trade, you certainly can. It's the beautiful thing about Excelsius. It's completely adaptable to any and every style. You just got to make sure that you confine it to what you're looking to do. Now, what we can see is that Excelsius is pulling into the rejection zone here, giving those indications of slowdown or deceleration. Ultimately, now we're going to simply just set up accordingly. Now, what we want to see here, if we do want any type of short-term sells, is definitely some type of higher time frame break within here. That's definitely going to allow for some type of descending pressure. And ultimately, this is what's going to start creating that potential buy opportunity that we are continuing to look for, considering the market is still bullish nonetheless. But still, Excelsius really giving us potential opportunities. If we wanted to continue forward, maybe if we could start to get above these previous highs here, but you can see once again, Excelsius telling you to the left there that we are in a sensitive region. Rejection zones are also giving that indication. And so because of that, we very much want to just wait and see what price is going to do before we move accordingly. We are in a sensitive region. Excelsius's tools are very much telling us that no matter the time frame you move within, the rejection zones are clearly there. The previous points of market structure are previously there. And so at this point, it's a matter of just simply dictating what type of plays do we want. Do we want these aggressive plays in this rejection zone? Do we want to trade these counter trend, or do we want to simply try to look for the continued movements? Or do we want all three? That's the beauty, once again, when it comes down to Excelsius. You can do whatever and whichever you please, all based on your comforts and overall preferences within the market. It's the beautiful thing about Excelsius. It's completely adaptable to any and every single style of trading. Once again, it just comes down to what you're looking to achieve at that given time. And so gold, a little bit different than BTC and S&P in that regard, because they're not necessarily stuck in a range. They are a little bit more of an established direction. And because of that, you can be a little bit more biased, but it does not mean that you can't continue to set up for other plays. And so gold very much looking for continued movements. We'll see what price gives us. Excelsius, once again, giving us those pieces of data that we need, and then simply waiting accordingly. If we want to go ahead, we just simply go ahead and set our alerts. We'll go ahead and simply select Excelsius and create higher highs in there if we want to look for those continued buys. And what's super unique is if we wanted to see a potential bullish play, we ultimately would need some type of lower high to develop. We can go ahead and add an alert and tell Excelsius to let us know when a lower high has developed. So then we can go ahead and look for higher highs on that play. It's the beautiful thing about Excelsius. It does the work for us. All we got to do is be at the chart and get ready to fire away. And so precious metal, gold, very much looking similar to S&P and BTC, but not so much in a range. We'll see what market gives us and utilize Excelsius to take it to another level. Moving on from S&P, we're going to take a look at, moving on from gold, we'll take a look at US oil and take it to FX after. But we can see very similar to gold here. Market did continue its bullish run from Friday's close. We did just recently create some higher highs within here. Now, some may ask, why are there no points of structure being developed by Excelsius within here? Is because this whole movement on the weekly and the monthly will simply be a straight impulse. Yep, and we can just see it's one straight movement to the upside. There is no real developed structure within here. It's just simply one movement. And so because of that, that is why Excelsius doesn't label this as any type of structure within here. Nonetheless, though, it doesn't mean that you can't look for any type of sell setups, but you want to be mindful once again. Use Excelsius's data to tell you when it's appropriate. We are pushing into that second rejection zone within here. However, we want to be mindful market is still bullish within here, and this does not change anything. Rejection zones are giving indications of potential slowdown, deceleration, and exhaustion. Ultimately, we want confirmations. Similar to gold, we can be a little bit biased on this in context to the direction, but ultimately we want to see what Excelsius is providing us and moving accordingly. And so what we can see here is as follows. On the smaller time frame, we can see that we are sitting within the rejection zone, similar to what's going on in the daily here. And we can see that price is definitely starting to chop out. However, even though we are chopping out, we can still see that we are moving in very much of a bullish environment. And because of that, we want to just make sure that we are setting up our plays accordingly. We're very much going to be looking at this as the same game plan as we looked for gold, simply for the fact that, hey, if you want to look for higher highs and break above and try to continue, so be it. If you want to try to start breaking back inside and seeing if you can start getting some short-term sell setups, you definitely can as well. We'd want to drop to the smaller time frame. Or if you'd simply like to look for this long back to the upside, that is an opportunity as well. And that's the beautiful thing pertaining to Excelsius. Really can provide you any and every single play. Ultimately, it just comes down to what your goal is when you are in the market. Now, we can see here that price is struggling to get above this previous high, also sitting within this first zone of the rejection zone. It does make sense. Ultimately, what we can see here is that if we wanted to start breaking down the structure, a key break below that 92 handle is going to start allowing some of this bullish momentum to start letting off. Failure to do so will simply just result in a range-bound environment within this area, and it may or may not something be that you want to be involved within. Ultimately, it's the options accordingly. If you want to trade this small leg, you certainly can. Be mindful of the keyword I said within there: small, short term, because the market is overall bullish on the daily time frame. Excelsius giving you those key points if you want to take trades a little bit earlier. Nonetheless, though, we want to be mindful what Excelsius's data is telling us and moving accordingly. That, of course, is the best way to get the most optimal results. And so very interesting, solely for the fact that looking at four markets straight off the bat, we can see here that we're not really having to force anything. We're simply just using what Excelsius is telling us from the higher time frames and trickling it down into the smaller time frames. S&P and the crypto side of things, indexes and cryptos, a little bit more similar in a range-bound environment. It simply just means that we're limited in context to how much direction we can get when we are in a given push. Commodities and precious metals, very similar on that side, solely for the fact that they are in bullish states. They did just previously create higher highs. And because of that, you very much can be a little bit more biased on that. However, we want to be mindful, once again, how sensitive the region is, and that may just simply make you more mindful when it comes down to looking for your take profits. And so notice how sick this is when it comes to Excelsius. Ultimately, it's simply providing the data, and we just simply have to show up when those plays are available. Once again, you do not need to be at the chart 24/7. Ultimately, you can go ahead, set the type of alerts you want. If you'd like autopilot, simply just set any alert function call. If you'd like specific alerts, set those specific alerts accordingly and simply create that alert and go on about your day. This is the reason why Excelsius was designed, to be those second pairs of eyes and ears for you when you cannot be at the charts. Excelsius is there to take your trading to a whole new level. And so for market straight out the gates, very much lucrative opportunities, but it is very much going to be a waiting game for now. Nothing too crazy on each side, but Excelsius is setting up the plays for us. Now, last but not least, we're going to take a look at the FX market for today. We'll take a look at a fan favorite Euro USD and take a look at what is going on in the bigger picture. Now, what we can see on the FX side of things is as follows. We can see that price in and of itself is very much bearish with the most recent break here within this previous point. However, we can see that since breaking through that, we got a massive push back. And what we can see, however, is that price is failing to break through this previous high and may result in a further continued movement back down to these previous lows. Now, what we can see, however, is that price is somewhat in a sensitive region. Even though there isn't much room that is taken on off this previous push, we did break through a lot of orders. And so we definitely could see some type of chop into these previous regions within here and potentially start to decelerate and exhaust the rejection zones. At the same time, we'll start to give those indications as this continues to develop. And so ultimately, once again, what we can see here is that the rejection zones and market structure settings are giving us those plays, those setups to ultimately go ahead and execute. It's a matter of just us showing up and making sure we're mindful of what's going on in the longer time frame. Market's bearish. We very much know that. We are looking for potential continued pushes downside, but we are going to be mindful that we are in a sensitive region just coming off of that rejection zone. Now, dropping into the smaller time frames here, what we can see is that price did just recently bounce off of a previous rejection zone late last month, early this month, and we can see that price did just recently bounce off the previous, establishing a range between this 111.2 area up until about this 114.8 region. And so because of that, we do have some short-term plays here and there when you do break through some successful points. What we can see is that price does successfully give a further continued movement to the downside. At the same time, however, what we can see is that when price does break through some past structures, they are going to be limited with the movement that they have. Notice when we break what we pushed into, a big trap for buyers, ultimately for sellers to take control of. And once we snap through this point in structure, you can see how smoothly this did successfully move too. And so really cool, unique tactic there for Excelsius, how to call false break movements, price breaking through a previous point in market structure, getting stuck in between those previous highs in a rejection zone. Icing on the cake is breaking through the lows, this past market structure, and you see such a clean movement to the downside. That is what Excelsius is all about, giving you a unlimited amount of possibilities when it comes to execution. It just comes down to what you're comfortable with. When it comes down to looking for those further continued movements, we'll drop down a little bit smaller and we'll take a look to see what opportunities we may have. If we successfully break through this previous point, we very much could look for continued movements back down. However, if we don't, we do want to see what happens within this rejection zone. We are currently sitting within the first zone of the rejection zone. And so because of that, we're very much going to want to see, do we start to pull off and potentially get some correction after all of this descending pressure, or do we start to continue this bearish pressure by successfully breaking through this previous point? Once again, Excelsius setting up the play for us really matters just for us showing up and taking a look at what's available. And so taking a look at 5 markets across the board, 5 different pairs, notice what had happened. All we had to successfully do was simply take a look from the higher time frames and drop down, taking a look at what Excelsius was telling us. If, for example, we're taking a look at the indexes or crypto space, we can see that market is predominantly in a range-bound market. And with that, we want to make sure that our execution is reflective accordingly. However, we take a look at precious metals and the commodities market, a little bit more similar in that regard, creating higher highs, establishing a bullish market, definitely showing that we still want to be looking for the buys, but it can be limited because of the regions that we're in. FX, however, on the other hand, a little bit more choppier on that side, but still doesn't mean that we can't continue to look for those sell plays in Euro USD in this example. But notice once again, we don't need to force the plays. We're simply just assessing accordingly and setting our alerts. And the beautiful thing about when we set our alerts is that Excelsius is constantly adapting as it's developing new points. And so previous points that we once were looking for, if the structure continues to develop, ultimately Excelsius is going to be there to make sure that it's on top of it. And so this is truly the revolutionary aspect when it comes to Excelsius. It's the level of efficiency and overall adaptability for any and every single market participant that it provides. No matter what style you have, no matter what market you trade, no matter what your goals are, Excelsius was designed to accomplish it all. And that's the most incredible aspect of it. And so in each of these live demos, we're constantly going through different topics, different ways that you can take your trading to a whole new level with Excelsius. And so with that, that's going to conclude this past week's weekly live demo with Excelsius. Thank you so much for tuning in. These take place every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern. As always, if you have any questions, please don't ever hesitate to reach out on the website at www.pinksand.co.